They were celebrating 5 years of marriage, as if the years before didn't matter, as if the broken pieces of someone else's family weren't still buried under that carefully arranged dinner table. Cameron sat quietly at the far end. His father raised a glass, smiling with pride. Next to him, Sharon, his stepmother, stood up and tapped her fork against the glass like she was leading some heartfelt orchestra. She began to speak. "I just want to say how proud I am of our blended family," she said, "and of the son I've come to love like my own." Laughter, nods, a few polite claps, but not from Cameron. Something in his chest tightened. A sentence that might have sounded warm to everyone else felt like a dagger wrapped in silk. There it was again, this polished version of their story, one where she became the nurturing figure who healed the family after the storm. But Cameron remembered the actual storm. He remembered the day his mother collapsed on the kitchen floor after learning her husband was cheating. He remembered wiping her tears while his father packed his bags for another woman. And now that same woman stood before a room full of people, calling herself his second mother. He smiled. Barely. It was the kind of smile you offer at funerals, not out of joy, but out of duty. He wanted to leave. He didn't. Instead, he waited until the speeches ended, until the plates were cleared, until the room buzzed with small talk and wine. Then, with a voice that barely rose above a whisper, he said to Sharon, "Please don't speak about me like that again. It feels dishonest." Sharon blinked. "Excuse me," Cameron held her gaze. "You're not my mother. You never were. And saying you love me like your own, after what you did to this family, it doesn't sit right." Her face stiffened. "It was my wedding anniversary. Cameron, you could have been polite. And you could have respected a marriage before stepping into it." She gasped. Her eyes welled. She turned away as if wounded. His father stormed over seconds later, face flushed, asking what the hell was going on. Cameron didn't explain. He didn't owe them that. Later that night, his aunt texted him, "You didn't have to say that. Sometimes it's better to smile and keep the peace." Cameron stared at her message for a long time, because peace was the exact thing he'd never had in that house. Just silence. And sometimes silence is not peace. Sometimes it's just a wound that never got to speak. He went to bed wondering if she claimed to love him like her own. Why did it feel like his identity had been erased, not embraced? He had no idea that the answer to that question was hidden in a letter that was supposed to change everything, but never reached the man it was meant for. If you've ever been told to stay silent for the sake of peace, or felt erased by someone claiming to love you, this story is for you. Stick around, because what Cameron finds next will reveal a truth deeper than betrayal. Follow Heartstories for more true stories that speak where others stay silent. Cameron had been 16 when the house fell apart. He remembered the day clearly, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. No shouting, no plates crashing, just quiet. His mother had found the messages by accident, an open tab on the family computer. Hotel bookings, late-night texts from Sharon that began with, "I miss you," and ended with, "When can you leave her?" The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence that followed. That night, she didn't cry in front of Cameron. Not at first. She cooked dinner like normal, set the table, asked about school. But when she dropped the glass while drying it and the shards scattered across the tile, something in her cracked. She sank to the floor, surrounded by broken glass, and whispered, "I think it's over." Cameron sat down beside her and held her hand. No one taught a 16-year-old how to comfort a mother whose world was collapsing. He wasn't ready, but there was no one else. She tried to hide it in the following days, wore lipstick to court, straightened her spine when signing papers. But at night, she folded inward, curled on the sofa with the curtains drawn. Cameron became the adult. He reminded her to eat. He checked her medication. He held her when the loneliness got louder than the television. And then came the letter. He wrote it late one night, hands trembling, heart pounding. He had known for a while who he was, what he felt, that he liked boys, that it wasn't a phase, that no amount of silence would make it disappear. But the timing, it felt cruel. He didn't want to add more pain to her plate, but he also didn't want to live pretending. So he wrote it all down, folded it twice, slipped it into her bag before school. That evening, she didn't say anything, but there was a warmth in her eyes when she looked at him. She didn't need to say it out loud. She knew, and more than that, she accepted. From that moment, she became the only person he felt truly seen by, the only one who didn't treat him like a phase or a shameful thing to be fixed. They built a quiet bond, no rainbow flags, no loud parades, just safe glances, shared jokes, a world where he didn't have to explain himself. When the custody ruling granted joint arrangement, Cameron started spending weekends at his father's new house. It felt like exile. There was no hostility, no harsh words, just the kind of politeness that suffocates. Sharon smiled too much. His father acted as if nothing had ever happened. They never brought up the divorce, never brought up his mom, and absolutely never mentioned the letter. So Cameron waited for his father to say something, anything. To ask if he was seeing someone, to check in on his heart. But years passed, and the silence only grew louder. His mother, meanwhile, began to heal. Slowly, she started painting again, started laughing again. The spark came back, not all at once, but enough to light up the kitchen again. And then the diagnosis. It was sudden. Stage 4. It didn't give her time to prepare or say goodbye in the way she wanted. Cameron held her hand in the hospital bed, whispered stories about places they'd go if there was time. "I hope you live louder than I did," she said. Days before passing, he promised he would. But grief has a way of making promises feel impossible. After she was gone, Cameron stopped writing, stopped dating, stopped talking about who he was. It felt like the only person who ever truly knew him had disappeared, and everyone else just played along without seeing. At that anniversary dinner, when Sharon said she loved him like her own, he didn't just hear words. He heard a rewrite of history, a version where his mother didn't matter, where Sharon took her place, where Cameron was a character in a narrative that didn't belong to him. But what Sharon didn't know, what even Cameron didn't know yet, was that the silence surrounding his identity wasn't an accident. Someone had made sure it stayed that way. And the letter he once wrote, it wasn't the only one. It happened on a Sunday. Cameron had returned to his father's house to collect a few of his childhood belongings, sketchbooks, old journals, dusty trophies still sitting on the top shelf of his former bedroom closet. It had been years since he'd stepped foot inside that room, and yet everything felt eerily untouched, as if his father and Sharon had preserved it like a museum exhibit of someone they once knew, but no longer spoke of. He moved slowly, letting his fingers graze across the spines of books, the smooth edge of his old desk. There was a sense of distance, not just in time, but in understanding. This had once been a space filled with drawings, playlists, secret glances to text conversations he never dared share. And yet none of that life seemed to linger anymore. He reached for a hardcover journal wedged between two heavy books. As he pulled it out, something thin and yellowed slipped from the back cover and floated gently to the floor. A letter, folded neatly, worn at the edges, and the moment his eyes fell on the handwriting, his heart stopped. It was his, the letter he had written to his father at 17, his coming out letter. He remembered every word, the way he had tried to make it sound calm, unblaming, honest, how he had explained who he was without asking for permission, but still quietly hoped for love. He had left it on the corner of his father's desk one morning before school. When no response came, he assumed the silence was deliberate, that maybe his father had read it and chosen to say nothing. It had hurt, but he learned to swallow that pain, to keep it inside. But the letter was here, unopened, and written in red ink across the sealed flap, in a hand that wasn't his. "Don't. It's a phase. Throw it out." Cameron's breath caught. His chest tightened. He knew that handwriting. Sharon, the same woman who had stood beside his father and called him her son in front of a room full of strangers. The same woman who had spoken of love and blended families and second chances. She had seen the letter, and instead of delivering it, she had hidden it. She had taken his truth and buried it like trash. His hands trembled. He clutched the letter and sat on the edge of his old bed, his thoughts swirling between disbelief and fury. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was erasure. All these years, he had believed his father simply didn't care, that he had read the words and chosen not to respond. But now, a crueler truth emerged. His father had likely never seen the letter at all. Cameron stared at it for a long time, then scanned it using his phone. The timestamp confirmed everything metadata from the original image on an old hard drive created at 17. Never modified. Undeniable proof. He wanted to scream. Not just at Sharon, but at the silence she had created. At the version of his life where his identity had been paused, delayed, deferred, dismissed not by accident, but by someone's choice. All those holidays where Sharon had smiled and handed him gifts. The polite questions about work. The carefully chosen words that never asked about love. Now he understood. She hadn't just ignored that part of him. She had actively worked to erase it. And in doing so, she robbed not only Cameron, but his father too. That night, he couldn't sleep. He opened the letter again, this time reading it out loud to himself. "Dad, I'm writing this because I need you to know who I am. Even if it's hard to say face to face, I'm gay. I didn't choose it. I'm not confused. This is just me. I'm telling you because I still want to be seen. Not for who you want me to be, but for who I really am." The words cracked in his throat. He read it again, slower. And when he was done, he realized something. He wasn't the one who had failed to speak. He had spoken. They just never listened. It was time they did. Cameron didn't call ahead. He showed up at the house 2 nights later. The scanned letter printed in full and folded inside his coat. His fingers curled around it the entire drive. Like holding it tighter might somehow make what happened feel less cruel. The dinner table was already set when he arrived. Salmon, roasted potatoes, a bottle of white wine breathing beside 3 glasses. Sharon answered the door with a surprised smile that vanished the second she saw the look on his face. His father came down from the upstairs study, clearly unprepared for whatever this was. "Is everything okay?" he asked. Cameron didn't respond. He simply placed the folded paper on the table. "Before we eat, I need you to read this." His father hesitated. Sharon glanced at the page like it might burn her. He unfolded it himself and slid it across. "The letter," Cameron said softly. "The one I wrote you when I was 17. His father's brows knit. He picked it up slowly, read the first lines, then the middle, then the last, and something in his face began to fall. "I never saw this," he said, barely above a whisper. Cameron nodded. "I know. I just found it hidden inside a book upstairs. It wasn't open, but someone wrote across the flap. You can guess who?" Sharon shifted in her seat. "That was years ago. You were confused. I thought it was just a teenage phase." "No," Cameron interrupted. "Don't do that. Don't shrink it down into something convenient. You read that letter? You made a decision not to talk to me, not to give it to him. You made sure my truth never made it to the person who needed to hear it." Sharon's voice rose. "I was protecting your father. He didn't need one more thing to carry after the divorce." "And what about me?" Cameron snapped. "What about the son he supposedly still cared about? You think shielding him justified erasing me?" The room crackled with silence. His father held the letter in both hands, like it might fall apart if he moved too quickly. His eyes were damp, but more than anything else, there was confusion in them. Not at Cameron, at himself. "I thought," he started, then stopped. "I thought you didn't want to talk about it, that you were angry, that you didn't trust me." Cameron's chest ached. "I did trust you. I wrote you that letter because I trusted you would care enough to hear me." His father looked down. "All this time, I've been wondering why you pulled away." "I didn't pull away," Cameron said. "I was cut out." Sharon stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I made a mistake," she said sharply. "But I'm still your family." "No," Cameron said calmly. "You're my father's wife. That's it." Her lips parted like she might argue. but no words came out. She left the room in silence. His father stared at the place she'd stood moments earlier, then turned to Cameron. "I should have asked," he said. "I should have looked harder. I let her speak for too many things." Cameron leaned back, letting the truth settle. "I'm not angry that you didn't fight her," he said. "I'm angry that you didn't fight for me." His father nodded slowly. "You're right." And just like that, something shifted. Not a repair, not yet, but the first honest fracture in a wall of years-long silence. His father placed the letter down gently. Then he looked up with eyes that finally seemed to see. "I want to understand," he said, "if you'll let me." Cameron didn't respond immediately. He was tired, but he wasn't afraid anymore. He nodded. "I'll think about it." Weeks passed after the confrontation. Cameron didn't rush back to his father's house, nor did he try to rekindle something broken too quickly. Some wounds needed air before they could even think about healing. He went back to his small apartment, the letter now framed on his desk not as a token of pain, but as a reminder I spoke, and I mattered. Then, one rainy morning, a letter arrived. The envelope bore the name of a law firm he recognized. It had handled his mother's affairs after her passing. He'd thought all of that had been settled years ago. Inside was a note, a formal invitation. "Mr. Cameron Ellis, you are requested to be present for the reading of a posthumous personal letter, as requested in the final instructions of the late Margaret Ellis. Enclosed is a sealed message and an item of inheritance not previously disclosed." Cameron's hands trembled. It had been over 3 years since she passed. He hadn't known there was anything left to say. But the moment he stepped into the quiet office, greeted by an elderly lawyer with soft eyes and a tired smile, he felt her presence again. Not as a ghost, but as a voice waiting patiently. The lawyer passed him a small wooden box. Inside was a flash drive and a letter, handwritten in his mother's careful script. He opened the letter first. "My sweet boy, if you're reading this, then somehow I found the courage I didn't have before. There were things I never told you, not because I didn't trust you, but because I wasn't ready to let you carry more weight. You deserved lightness. You deserved joy." She went on to describe a summer, long before he was born, a relationship she'd kept secret from almost everyone, a man named Daniel, her best friend, her first love. Daniel was kind, gentle, and he was also gay. We found comfort in each other, even though we knew it wouldn't last. We were both hiding, but in those few months, I saw the kind of love that didn't need to be explained. I didn't know then that he would shape how I loved you. You remind me of him." Cameron sat frozen, the words pouring through him like water cracking stone. "I'm sorry I couldn't fight harder. Sorry I didn't do more to protect your voice. But if I left anything behind, I hope it's this: you are never wrong for being exactly who you are." The letter ended with a simple line: "Use the flash drive. The gift is yours." He plugged it into his laptop that night. The screen lit up with images, scanned artwork, notes, journals, all Daniel's. His mother had kept them, preserved them, protected the memory of a man the world forgot because he had loved fully, but quietly. But that wasn't the twist. The folder also contained a legal deed one she had requested be transferred to his name, only after he turned 25. A small cottage in her hometown. The place where she and Daniel had once spent a season together, painting, writing, dreaming. Now it was his. And taped to the inside of the box was a photograph. His mother and Daniel, smiling, free, barefoot in the grass, a rainbow barely visible in the background. Cameron wept, not because he missed her, but because he finally understood her. The pain she carried, the silence she endured, and the love quiet, steady, fierce that never stopped finding ways to reach him. He visited the cottage months later, restored the garden, hung both letters side by side, and hosted a small exhibition in the living room, open to anyone who had ever felt erased. He titled it "Things That Were Meant to Be Read." Sometimes the people who leave us have more to give than those who stay. And sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't money or land or property. It's truth, it's legacy, it's being seen. Have you ever discovered something after someone passed that changed how you saw them? Share your story below. Someone out there might need to hear it. If this story moved you, follow Heart Stories for more real, emotional journeys that speak what others leave unspoken. Because silence doesn't protect love, only truth does.